And I would like to welcome you all to tonight's deep dive, where we're going to dive a little bit deeper into coughing and sneezing, something that I think most people do on a regular basis, but maybe we don't know that much, or it's sometimes you just don't think that much. It's one of the things I've wanted to do with this series is pull out some things that um, seem sometimes commonplace and rather ordinary, and just really get into them more to see that there can be a real deeper depth of understanding of everyday things. That sometimes we just, we know a little bit about something and then we're good with that. And sometimes you can explore and find out much more fascinating things. And so that's what I'm hoping we're going to do today. So I'm going to take a second here, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Um, yeah, I think this is the proper way to do it. And then pull this up. Go ahead and get started with this. Everybody seen the screen okay? I'm going to take your silence as assent. So we're going to talk today about coughing and sneezing, which this year has certainly taken on a bigger aspect, or a more important aspect of our life, and it's something that people think about. I remember in early March, before everything shut down, it might have even been late February or early March, I had laryngitis. And I was walking around and talking like a cartoon character with a very, faint, odd voice. And I didn't get a second look from anybody. But if in the middle or at the end of that sentence I sneezed, people looked at me like I had 7 heads and I needed to go away. That they were already starting to queue up on sneezing and coughing in public. So, and it's been important. This is a British, this is from the United Kingdom, British. A public service announcement from the Second World War time period, from somewhere between 39 and 45, where they're trying to remind people that, just coughing or sneezing, wide open without any kind of instruction is really not helping, and to, try to do something to stop the spread. And in this case, something that isn't used much anymore is a handkerchief. I remember carrying one as a kid, and I got mocked mercilessly for it in grade school, and so I don't have one anymore. But even this one goes back to the First World War. I found this one really interesting, that, coughs and sneezes spread diseases. You still got that rhyme, that easy to remember slogan. And this one is very much about, not getting sick, so that you don't stop your support of war production. So it's a slightly different kind of public service announcement. But my favorite, we've gone away from handkerchiefs and, coughing in our hands and washing them, to coughing into your sometimes the back of the hand, but a lot of times now what they talk about is coughing into your elbow. And I love the idea of the Dracula cough. It's kind of dated. I don't know if young kids can get that same reference out of it, but it's my favorite, the Dracula cough sneeze, where you cough into essentially your elbow. Or your sleeve in this case. This is from the University of Arizona Campus Health Service. So let's talk here about the difference between coughing and sneezing. Cough is when you have a sudden expulsion of air through your air passages, through the breathing, and it's going to help clear them of fluids. It can help rid the lungs as well. But you're getting rid of fluids, you're getting rid of irritants, you're getting rid of mucus buildup, foreign particles, microbes, anything you don't want in there it's hampering, interfering, or with your breathing, or just irritating the airways. A cough can be something you do. There, I coughed. I just did that myself. I didn't have to. So sometimes it makes you want to cough more. But a cough can be very voluntary, and it can be involuntary. I can think of many different times where, something has set me going, and it's been hard to stop. And, I've been through bronchitis several times, and, coughs can be painful if you keep going and you cough yourself raw. Sneezing, or sternutation, which is just a fantastic word. I got several fantastic words I can't wait to share tonight. It's going to be a $5 word night during this program. Is a semi-autonomous convulsive explosion. It's also not it's not really something that you can control or you can make happen. To a point you can, but you can't just sneeze. You can trigger a sneeze, but you can't really just sneeze. And it's also an expulsion of air from the lungs, but it goes through the nose and mouth. and it's usually caused by an irritation in the nasal mucosa, and that's really important. It's pretty distinctive because these are two things that do accomplish a similar endpoint or objective, but they do it two different ways and for two different areas. So here's our respiratory system. You can see we got the lungs down here in the chest, the trachea leading up to the mouth, and then of course up here we have the nose and the sinus cavities. When you're coughing, you're forcing air from the lungs and from the trachea, from these upper respiratory passageways. When you're coughing, you're trying to clear them of an irritation, a foreign object, mucus, a bit of food that went down. That can be a real issue. As I might say this again later, but as mammals, we chew and prepare our food by chewing in the mouth before it goes down. It's, when they talk about digestion, the first bit of a digestion is that breakdown, that mechanical breakdown in your mouth. The saliva helps to start breaking things down as well. It's almost pre-digested before it reaches the stomach. But if as humans, if we talk, if we communicate, if we laugh, if we do something that we shouldn't be doing, we jump up because something startles us. Because of that chewing process, it can a piece of food can be dislodged and become an irritation or life-threatening in the trachea or any of those passageways. Some other animals that swallow things whole, like when you think of some reptiles, some birds, even some amphibians, where they grab their prey and then swallow it whole without any kind of chewing, they can actually suspend breathing doing that, and then that can also prevent from a particle or a piece of their food then getting lodged in an airway. Snakes, when they breathe, especially like large snakes that swallow something big, where it could take many minutes, sometimes maybe an hour. If you're talking about some of those bigger pythons, they actually have a tube that can open on their lower jaw, that opens underneath where the prey is lodged in their mouth, so they can, if they pause from swallowing, they can take a breath and then go back to swallowing. But they're not trying to breathe, or they're suspending breathing while they swallow, so that prevents that. Now a sneeze deals with very much clearing out that nasal cavity and making that clear, so getting any irritant there. So if you've got a cough, you're getting rid of something that's in your lungs or in your upper respiratory airways. If you sneeze, you're getting rid of something that's irritating your sinus cavity. I think I just said all that, but here's a nice summary of it. And again, for the cough, it's an airway, it's the lungs. For a sneeze, it has to do with the nasal cavity. So steps to the cough. I'm just demonstrating left and right for you all tonight. We get the cough reflex art. Essentially, you've got a stimulus, an irritation, something that says, hey, we need to cough. That sensation is sent via the nerves to the brain, and the brain responds through respiratory motor nerve, getting the respiratory muscles going, and a cough. Okay, it's pretty simple. It involves an inhalation and then a forced exhalation against the closed glottis. The glottis is this opening here in the diagram. You can see the vocal folds almost look like curtains with a little that dark opening in the middle, which is the entrance to the trachea. That opening is the glottis. So when you force an exhalation, that glottis is closed. So you inhale, you force against it, and then you open the glottis and everything comes out. Okay, so it's a violent release of air, and that helps, that buildup and that tension helps pull out anything. Hopefully it's going to help unlodge anything or remove the irritant or whatever is bothering you for which you need to cough. For a sneeze, there's a few extra steps. We'll probably talk a little bit more about sneezing than coughing, because I find sneezes to be absolutely fascinating. And my homework tonight after our program is to see if there's a book I need to be reading on this, because I've just enjoyed so much that I've learned about sneezes since wanting to do this program. Like any good relief, it starts with some kind of irritation. So it's just a regular nerve cell here. But you've got nerves in your nose that are reading this irritation wherever it might be in the mucosal lining, and sending a signal to the brain that says, hey, there's an irritation here, we need to get rid of it. The neural regions involved, blah, 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 are located in the brainstem along the ventromedial part of the spinal trigeminal nucleus. that is a statement that if you can write that down and memorize it, you can hopefully impress somebody. It's pretty neat. But again, this is the part of the brain where the stimulus is received, and that's going to turn around. This part of the brain is going to turn around and send a signal to other body parts. Essentially, it's going to prepare your body parts for a sneeze. You feel a sneeze coming, like the majority of the time. I don't think people are really surprised. You know it's coming. Sometimes it can be quicker than others, but you can always feel that. Because to me, one of the worst sensations is you get ready to do a sneeze and nothing happens, but your body started building up to it, and all of a sudden there's not that relief, and it just I'd rather sneeze and start to build up and then not have it. In most situations, there are times where I've been happy not to sneeze. So your brain says, hey, gets this signal and says, hey, we need to sneeze. So what happens is your abdominal and chest muscles activate, and they begin compressing the lungs. And that's when you start to get this look on your face, which is you're getting ready to sneeze. Then you're going to produce a blast of air through this compressions. And what happens next is the back of your tongue here, at the back of the oral cavity, is going to move up. It's going to elevate, and it's really kind of closing off this passageway here. What that does is that ensures that when you sneeze, a fair amount of that air is going to be forced through the nasal cavity and out the nostrils. Not all of it. Obviously, when you sneeze, there's still some that comes out of your mouth. But this closing here, and I believe the soft palate. And there's another part, I can't remember what it is, but the soft palate and another part of the body also depress as well. So they between those two pieces and the tongue, they all come together to really stopper up this as much as you can. It doesn't obviously work. You're still going to sneeze out your mouth, but it forces a lot of that air out of the nasal cavity, because the function of a sneeze is all about cleansing the nasal cavity and getting whatever nasal cavity. I think I said navel. Is cleansing the nasal cavity and getting whatever's in there out, so it stops the irritation. And you get a sneeze. And this is why you're supposed to cough in a handkerchief or in the crook of your elbow. There's a lot that comes out from a sneeze. This is. I'm hoping you guys can see my cursor. I don't know if you can or not. But essentially the central area here, if you take a second and kind of look back, the central area where you see SUP period tarsus, which my guess is that's probably superior tarsus and the bottom is inferior tarsus. These are actually muscles around the eyes. These are eyelid muscles. So, and I think maybe the orbicularis, I think, is part of those muscles too. Actually, maybe those are the eyelid muscles. I think of the orbicularis oculi here. And what happens is as part of this sneeze reflex, your body locks these eyelid muscles and locks your eyelid closed, at least for that split second. Now, I read somewhere that it's impossible to keep your eyes open, and I've heard this, and I don't think that's true. It's also definitely not true that if you keep your eyes open while you sneeze, they'll shoot off of your head. Though I know that as a kid I heard that many, many times, and I tried it and I could never get my eyes to open. But it is possible. I believe there's a Mythbusters episode about this where they talk about sneezing. I watched a little bit of prepping for this, but I couldn't find the part about the eyes. And they're able to fight off that reflex enough to keep their eyes open while they sneeze. And I'm sure it's protective to a certain level, but as far as I know, their eyes did not fly out of their head when they sneeze with their eyes open. So you can keep your eyes open, but it's not easy. It's a reflex, and you really got to fight it. I imagine it's probably very similar to the flinch reflex when somebody shoves something in your face rapidly and suddenly, and it causes you to blink, and that's another one of those little things that as kids you two for flinching and making people blink and playing little games like that. Now your sneeze, you can see this is a photograph of a sneeze here, and that plume is about 7 to 8 meters long. So 20 to 21 to 24 feet there, and that's pretty impressive. It can travel it can hit speeds of 100 miles per hour, which is probably initial, and it's certainly an initial speed which slows down probably pretty quickly. Um, but one of the other things I read or heard was 100,000 germs. I don't know if that means that they're all pathogens, that they're all that they're all containing something that can cause you to be sick, but certainly it has that potential to spread quite a bit around in a fair distance. And so again, whenever you're able to cover up a sneeze, that's pretty good. There are instances where people have injured themselves by stifling or trying to hold back a sneeze. I believe I've read that you can actually hurt facial muscles doing that by stifling a sneeze too thoroughly. So it's better to let it fly, or at least let it go, but obviously not let it fly in the sense that you're just sneezing wildly in the air. But you definitely don't want to hold back that sneeze, because it can be pretty painful. So what can induce sneezing? Again, I told you I was going to have some great names for you. There's the photic sneeze reflex, which it's also called the autosomal dominant compelling helio-ophthalmic outburst, or ACHOO syndrome, which might be the coolest name ever. Although then right after that, they also included photosnesia, and I couldn't decide which one I liked more. But essentially, you react to bright light, sunlight, by sneezing. What was interesting is it can cause you to sneeze anywhere from one or two to 10 times. But people who suffer from this often experience a refractory period, which means for maybe as long as 24 hours, they won't have this again. That whatever the mechanism is, it happens, and it doesn't repeat itself for then this period of time, which to me 24 hours doesn't seem like very long if it could happen again. If you sneeze every day because you see bright light. But it's really interesting that, again, a stimulus of the bright light makes people sneeze, and that's just one of the things. There's several more I've got here. Another one that's really interesting is fullness of stomach. A stomach sneeze reflex, where people will experience uncontrollable bursts of sneezing because they had a full meal. And somebody has jokingly called this, which is shown up in several places, that snatiation, meaning you sneeze after being satiated. So you reach snatiation. But this is definitely been something as well. I feel like it's similar into the other one, where this might also have a genetic link as well. And it's similar to something called gustatory rhinitis, which is rhinorrhea induced by certain foods. That's a fancy way of saying if you eat something spicy, your nose runs. So rhinorrhea is just a runny nose, and gustatory rhinitis means it's caused by eating something. Try not to overdo it with personal anecdotes tonight, but as a child growing up in my grandmother's house, especially during the cold and flu season, my grandma was very much subject to this. Not so much afterwards, but just at the beginning, sitting down for a hot meal, and her nose would start running after the first or second bite. And then my grandmother would swear out loud, because she was totally irritated that it happened again and again and again. And she would wipe her nose, and that would be it. But it was a constant thing. She should definitely experience this time and time again when it came to eating at the dinner table. Other things that can induce sneezing: a viral infection, allergens, sudden change in temperature. I don't think any of these are surprising. I used to love, living north of here, going out early in the morning when I'd be in the teens or 20s, and you walk out and you could just feel, it would be so cold, you take that first breath with your nostrils and you could just feel like everything inside your nose kind of freeze. And it was just, I always thought that was such a unique and really vibrant and experience, where you just wake you up and really make you feel alive. But it could also cause me to sneeze because it could be an irritation as well. So that happened occasionally. And allergens is certainly a thing. I made a point of wanting to make sure I didn't forget to talk about viral infections. If you are a disease, and again, they're not thinking of this isn't something that's thought of consciously. In an evolutionary context, this is all about survivability and passing on and passing on your genetic inheritance, your genetics, and replicating. And so, if you're a virus or a bacteria, if you're a pathogen and you're able to spread through coughing or sneezing, and then as part of the infection you cause in a host organism, you can produce that symptom or that effect. That's really going to help you sneeze and replicate. And obviously, that's something we're definitely seeing and talking about right now in the pandemic that we're currently in. And so, from an evolutionary standpoint, coughing or sneezing is really an important symptom for some of these pathogens. Excuse me. And so one of the reasons it's so vital for coughing in your elbow, but then also washing your hands if you're blowing your nose, or dealing with any of those essentially bodily fluids that are spreading. But yeah, as far as evolution goes, that this is a key. And again, coughs or sneezes aren't always an indicative symptom or an immediate symptom of a certain kind of illness. There's a lot of other things to take into account with those as well. So that's not just going to get you into one thing or into one immediate disease. So it's important to be cautious about that. And as I want to do, I save the best for last. Something else that can induce sneezing. There is actually information. This is nothing new. This has been around for more than 100 years. That there can be a component to sneezing where in sexual stimulus can cause somebody to sneeze, which is just really interesting. And it's not at a certain specific stage of or sexuality. It can happen at any time. It occurs independent of external stimuli or allergens. It means there's not something in your nose that then it's doubly activated because you're becoming intimate. It is literally a reaction to the stimulus of being aroused. And so it can occur if you just have thoughts that cause you to be aroused, or if you're in the beginning stages where arousal can cause you to sneeze as well, in the middle of intercourse, or at the end during orgasm. And so this is something that can be concerning and be, I'm sure, debilitating for some people. And so there's actually a pretty good history in the literature of this for people that were comfortable to come forward and say that this is something that was happening to them. And so this is pretty well researched and it's pretty interesting. One of the quotes I read is that this it's thought that this is a relic of of pieces of our autonomic nervous system, wherein literally some wires get crossed, like if you've got an electronic component and you've got the wrong sounds coming out of speakers or the wrong lights lighting up because you got some wires crossed. This is very similar, wherein you've got some connections in your nervous system either crossing or firing together at the wrong time, and that can produce this kind of a reaction to the stimulus of sexual thoughts or actual sexual intercourse or orgasm. So do animals cough or sneeze? They do. Some of you may have seen this. Only I think like a couple 100 million people have seen this clip, but I wanted to share it. Every time, sorry. So, poor older panda. So yes, animals do sneeze. But there is a qualification for that. So this is a black-tip reef shark. Sharks don't sneeze. They're one of the animals that don't. Their nostrils do not connect to the back of their throat, and so they can't produce a sneeze. It's interesting. They have nares or nostrils. Excuse me. If they got something in their nostrils, something that was irritating, something that could cause them to want to get rid of it because they can't snort a sneeze, they can't expel water. And certainly there are fish and other aquatic organisms that are able to cough, that they can still expel water in the same way that we expel air. But if a shark got something stuck up in his nostrils and it was really irritating, they would actually shake their head back and forth in an effort to dislodge it. It would be a very different mechanism from the way we would do it, which would be sneezing. So sharks, again, cannot sneeze. There are many, many organisms that do. Again, you've got to have that connection at the back of your throat, between the back of your throat and your nostrils in order to do that. It's certainly much more prevalent, I think, in mammals than in other species. What we consider sneeze, I'll talk about a reptile that does it as well, but I feel like it's kind of it's not as genuine a sneeze as what we've been talking about here in the program. Sea lions do a lot of sneezing. It's really easy to find video of sea lions sneezing. I saw some stuff that hinted that might have something to do with sea lion sneezing, might have something to do with communication. I think for a lot of animals, it's just like us. They got an irritation in your sinus cavity. You get rid of it. I've seen dogs and cats sneeze, sometimes multiple times, because one sneeze just doesn't do the trick for getting rid of whatever the irritation is. I had several dogs when I was a kid, and I used to play with them in a roughhouse with them. And if it got out of hand, one of us got a little too excited. And if my arm or hand or leg or something connected with the dog's muzzle, you'd get an immediate snort, because that would jar it and cause irritation. And so, there are some animals that do that more. Again, you can do a YouTube search and you find all kinds of different animals sneezing. But one of the stories I want to tell, I did get to go in this area. This is the Galapagos, back in college, and there were several of us on this trip. And I remember we walked around one of these colonies of sea lions. We had been snorkeling and seen them in water, and they could get a little bold because they don't have fear, because they're fairly well protected in this area. And I remember walking. I was at the rear of the group, and half, the rest of the group was already halfway behind the sea lion colony in the direction we were going. And I remember seeing a sea lion next to me lean up and sneeze, and watching the ejective go through the air and hit one of my friends, who was like 30 or 40 feet away from that sea lion. It was a really impressive shot, but it just went through the air. And for the sea lion, it wasn't it wasn't trying to make a point. It wasn't trying to scare anybody away. It was just doing that. But we learned really quickly to keep our distance from them in the water, because they could nip, and to keep our distance from them on the land, because other less fun things could happen. But again, if you have that connection in the back of the throat with the nostrils, you can sneeze. And so a lot of mammals will do it for different reasons. There's also something called reverse sneezing. If you have a dog or a cat, you may have seen this. It's also referred to as backward sneezing, or inspiratory paroxysmal respiration. And essentially, it's rapid and repeated, but it's a forced inhalation. So the air is going in rapidly instead of coming out in a sneeze. I also have a video for that. I had seen my dog do this several times. I'm going to skip ahead. Or it's not going to let me skip ahead. I've actually seen when my dog did it, it was repeated in several times. It can make dogs feel uncomfortable. From everything I've read, it's not life-threatening, but it can be distressing for them. In the same way that you can have something happen to you where it's not life-threatening, it's not going to really hurt you or harm you, but it's uncomfortable, and it can really send you. It can be a stimulus that fills you with anxiety. I watch my dog do it. It's very prevalent in in breeds that have brachycephalic skulls. That's the shortened face and the wide head. So that's something where the breadth of the head, the width of the head might be 80% of the length. So a very wide head and often a short nose. Pugs, pit bulls, boxers like these two here. These breeds, Boston Terriers, American Bulldogs, different bulldogs. In addition to hearing some kind of labored breathing that you often hear from these breeds, you can also very often get that reverse sneezing, which can be again, it can sound worse than it is. Doesn't seem to be a terrible issue, but it is something that you want to keep an eye on in case it becomes something. But usually it doesn't. I never had a concern when our dog did it, so hopefully be that same way. And I did want to talk about a non-mammal. This is a marine iguana, again, species endemic to the Galapagos Island. Marine iguana, especially the larger males. I don't know if females do this much. I feel like I remember males do this more, but the larger adults, you won't see the young or the smaller ones do this as much. But the larger adults, when they get bigger and they're able to do this, they got really good claws, and they'll swim out into the surf and go down onto the rocks and the coral here, and they will feed on this algae and plants that's growing under the water. When you feed underwater, you're going to ingest a lot of water. And in this case, they're in the ocean, so they're also getting a lot of salt. So one of the things they need to do is to get rid of that salt. And they can eject that from their nose. It's not quite a true sneeze, but it's pretty impressive. So right there, they're getting rid of that excess salt in their body. And if you look at the heads, you can see they're crusted with. There you go. Wait till the sound's not as high. You can see their head. There's a lot of salt crust on their head, so they don't necessarily clear the head as well, but they are getting it out of their body, which is really important. So you'll often see that salt crusted on their heads. Huh. Well, that went a little quicker than I expected when I went through on the dry run. Again, sometimes not talking to people, not having reactions makes it go a little quicker. I'm actually going to break out of here and come back to Teams and stop sharing my screen and see if anybody has any questions. And again, feel free to unmute if you have any questions about what we were talking about there. A lot quicker than I was expecting.
I have a question.
Sure, please.
So with dogs, like my dog tends to have like allergies.
Okay.
He's like environmental allergies, and so when I see him licking his skin and stuff and he also has, in that time of the year, he also has like sneezing. Like that doesn't have anything to do with the allergens out there.
I'm not a vet. I think it's very common for dogs to do that. They certainly can experience that. Whether they have the same reaction to allergens that we do, whether they're the same allergens or not, I don't know. They also tend to sniff a lot, and because they're sniffing a lot, and because that's how they explore the world, and they're sticking their noses in all kind of places, they can tend to sneeze more regularly than we will because of that. When I'm just having a dog for as long as we had, playing and stuff, you get the occasional sneeze, but take her out on a walk and she starts snuffling and sniffing, and you get tons of sniffs. I sometimes wonder too if dogs will do that preemptively, like they'll sniff a bunch of things and then they sneeze in order to essentially like almost cleanse the palate, because it is supposed to be a cleansing thing for sinus cavities, and I wonder if that sometimes helps them prepare them for their next scent by sneezing and get rid of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I might have just made that last point up, but it makes sense in my head. I don't know how scientific it was, but it is something I wonder if they do that.
Thank you. That
Sure,
was very.
sure.
I love your lectures.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
I was curious if there is anything that influences the volume of sneezes. I know sometimes people sneeze and it's super loud.
Oh, I did not talk about that. Thank you. Hang with me here because I think I left all my tabs open. I was reading a fantastic article. Here we go. Yes. The sound strength and volume of the sneeze may be influenced by individual differences in anatomy and physiology, such as lung capacity, upper airway capacity, and sensitivity of the trigeminal nerve. That's the nerve in your brain that's receiving the stimulus. It also depends on how much air goes out your nose versus your mouth. So if you have more of the air from your sneeze going out of your nose than your mouth, it's going to be quieter. What was neat is the article is definitely not a super scientific article in that it talked a lot about the cultural ramifications of a sneeze. It said that, you know, a sneeze seems to be very political, one of the most political of the bodily functions, not because and I was telling somebody this and they're like, isn't it the cough? Because you'd be like, somebody says something like, I don't know about that, you know, but their point with it, the sneeze being political, was the people have a sneeze, they sneeze a certain way, and they expect everybody else should do it that way. So whether it's a little, you know, for a however somebody does that, it's almost like a personal expression. Like everybody should sneeze like that. Let it out, you know. And you know, I was joking about that earlier. I definitely am not a quiet sneezer. And so, and it's been pointed out to me more than once. And so, I also know that, you know, when I do that, it's definitely a lot of it's coming out of my mouth. And so it can be that, but it could as much be about, you know, the amount of air coming out of your nose versus your mouth as the shape of your head and the shape of your oral cavity as well.
Thank you. That was really interesting.
Sure. I agree with you, Shell. You know, how much there is a certain amount of, you know, welcoming versus stifling what's going to come out, because I know sometimes I'm the last one awake in the house, and if I get a sneeze, I don't just want to let it rip, and so I can change my mouth and nose in a way. I don't know how to describe it, but I know I can let the sneeze come out a different way, and so I'm not at you, and it just comes out, but it never feels as good. And that it might have nothing to do with actual relief from an irritation, as it might just be psychological, but it never feels as good as when I do a regular old sneeze. Exactly. And I hear somebody's mic came on. Is there another question?
Yeah, have you ever heard a snake or a turtle sneeze or cough?
I haven't. We were just talking about this today, and I feel like I've either heard or seen a turtle sneeze, but it's also possible that my brain was just making that up to find that information. Iguanas were definitely listed as sneezing, but I don't really feel like that's a sneeze. What we were seeing was a sneeze, actually. It's similar to a sneeze, but I feel like that's very much voluntary. Like, I don't know that it's autonomic in the same way that our sneezes would be. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like, you know, within mammals, there's a lot of mammals that, you know, obviously cough and sneeze. It's very similar to us with the shapes of their mouths and the internal structures. But turtles or snakes, I don't know.
And what about insects? Do you suppose they cough out their spiracles?
No. I was reading something, and the entomologist that they talked to said it's very unlikely that they have a mechanism like that because of the very different ways that they respire using spiracles, and they don't think that it's something that you're going to see from that. See an insect do.
Thanks.
Sure. Whoops. That's not quite what I want to do. There we go. Coughing sound line. I don't know. I think the coughing sound. Oh yeah, no, I understood what you wrote there. No worries. I think that coughing sound, when they say like the coughing sound of lions, I think has more to do with the quality of sound and how it's heard than that it's actually a cough. And I could be wrong. Maybe it could be very similar mechanism how they do that. I'm not that familiar with lions, but I've heard animals that do make sounds that sound similar to a cough, and it might be a similar kind of increase in pressure against the glottis and then a release where they can make the sound louder. That's certainly, I think, a possibility. But sometimes I think when somebody talks about an animal coughing like that, sometimes what they're hearing is that the sound sounds to them like a cough, but it's not actually a cough. I hope I stumbled through that in a way that gave you the answer you were looking for.
Hi, Ken.
Hey, Gary.
Hey, because of technical problems, I missed the first part of your presentation, so I apologize if you've already talked about this. But
Okay.
Did you talk at all about dogs sneezing because they're happy?
Oh, you know what? I did not, and that is one of the things I read too. Is sometimes it is the stimulus from being overexcited can also cause dogs to sneeze as well. It can also cause them to piddle in your loafers. I've seen both. So, but yes, yeah, dogs can sneeze because they're happy. They get super excited, and it actually causes that stimulus that makes them sneeze.
Yeah, my wife gives our dog a good rub down in the morning, and it almost always induces a big sneezing outburst.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have our dog anymore, but we have a couple of cats, and I think our cats have taken an oath that they will not sneeze unless their face is within 5 inches of our face, because they always seem to like come up and right in front of you, and then they just sneeze, and it's gross.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, it's a cat. Exactly. That's what cats do. Cats have their own credo, their own codes. Any other questions? It's funny. I feel like I'm letting you guys out early. It's a snow day. We should be done early. I thought I was go a little bit further, but I appreciate you all being here. I'm going to hang out for a couple more minutes if anybody has any questions. I always like to promote the next one, and I don't remember what I'm doing. Thank you. I don't remember what I'm doing next month. I know in February I'm doing Who Needs Love. I've done a couple of different mating programs, and in February I'm essentially doing one that's Under the Ice. Thank you. Under the Ice. That'll be the next one I do, and then in February I'm doing Who Needs Love. It's essentially reproduction without mating and all those customs. So I appreciate all the kind comments coming up in the chat there. So you can sign up for them now, and they'll be around, and I'll send out reminders as well. So hopefully I'll talk and see some more of you at those in the future. If anybody has any questions, oh, go ahead.
Did I miss the aquatic life, the aquatic wildlife one?
Under the Ice.
Oh, maybe that was the same one. Okay, maybe
yeah, that one. That's in January. Yep, that'll be next month.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah, no problem. Very good. Well, thank you. So if nobody else has any questions, well, I don't mind sitting here and watching all the nice compliments roll through on the chat. But if nobody has any questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and I'm probably going to hang up. So last chance. Oh, I see a lot of people going. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a great evening. I appreciate you joining me here, and hopefully we'll see you again in a couple of weeks.